Chapter 6, the time-binding semantic circuit. It says that when you put two minds together, there is always a third mind, a third and superior mind, as an unseen collaborator. William S. Burroughs from The Third Mind. Human beings are time binders. The third semantic circuit handles artifacts and makes a map, reality tunnel, which can be passed on to others, even across generations. These maps may be paintings, blueprints, words, concepts, tools, with instructions on use transmitted verbally, theories, music, etc. Human beings, domesticated primates, are symbol-using creatures, which means, as the pioneer semanticist Korzybski noted, that those who rule symbols rule us. If Moses, Confucius, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, and St. Paul can be considered living influences, and they are, look around the world, this is only because their signal has been carried to us by human symbol systems. These systems include words, artworks, music, rituals, and unrecognized rituals, games, through which culture is transmitted. Marx and Hitler, Newton and Socrates, Shakespeare and Jefferson, etc. continue to rule parts of humanity in the same way through the semantic circuit. We are ruled even more and even less consciously by the inventors of the wheel, the plow, the alphabet, even the Roman roads. Since words contain both denotations, reference in the sensory existential world, and connotations, emotional tones, and poetic or rhetorical hooks, humans can be moved to action even by words which have no real meaning or reference in actuality. This is the mechanism of demagoguery, advertising, and much of organized religion. The biosurvival circuit only divides experience into two sets: that which is good for me or nourishing, and that which is bad for me or threatening. The emotional territorial circuit also divides the world into two halves: that which is more powerful than me, higher in the pecking order, and that which is less powerful than me, lower in the pecking order. On this basis, sociobiological systems evolve and animal societies of truly human complexity have been studied. The semantic circuit allows us to subdivide things and reconnect things at pleasure. There is no end to its busy labeling and packaging of experience. On the personal level, this is the internal monologue discovered by Joyce in Ulysses. On the historical level, this is a time-binding function described by Korzybski, which allows each generation to add new categories to our mental library, connecting new things, separating new things, reclassifying and reshuffling forever. In this time-binding dimension, Einstein replaced Newton before most of the world had heard of Newton. Simple arithmetic gave birth to algebra, which brought forth calculus, which produced tensor calculus, etc. Haydn and Mozart prepared the way for Beethoven, who broke into the realms that the Romantics and Wagnerians took over, which gave birth to what is called music today. So-called future shock has always been with us since the semantic circuit began functioning somewhere in prehistory. In a symbolizing, calculating, abstracting species, all times are times of change. The process is, however, accelerating faster as time passes because the symbolizing faculty is inherently self-augmenting. In ordinary language, the semantic circuit is usually called the mind. As psychologist Robert Ornstein said in a recent radio show, when we say someone has a good mind, we generally mean they have a good mouth. For instance, they use the semantic circuit well. In terms of transactional analysis, the first oral circuit is called the natural child. The second emotional circuit is called the adapted child, and the semantic circuit is called the adult or computer. In Jungian terms, the first circuit mediates sensation, the second circuit feeling, and the third circuit reason. The neurological components of the first circuit go back to the oldest parts of the brain. Carl Sagan called these functions the reptile brain. These neural structures are at least billions of years old. The second circuit structures appeared with the first amphibians and mammals somewhere around 1,000 million or 500 million years ago. Sagan called them the mammalian brain. The semantic circuit appeared perhaps 100,000 years ago. Sagan called it the human brain. It should be no surprise that most people, most of the time, are controlled more by the older reptilian mammalian circuits than by the human semantic rational circuit, or that the semantic circuit is so easily perverted into false logics, bigotries, intolerant ideologies, fanaticisms of all sorts. When the biosurvival circuit signals threat to life or the emotional circuit flashes threat to status. Cynics, satirists, and mystics, circuit 5 to 8 types, have told us over and over that reason is a whore. For instance, that the semantic circuit is notoriously vulnerable to manipulation by the older, more primitive circuits. However much the rationalists may resent this, it is always true in the short run. That is, to use one of the rationalists' favorite words, it is always pragmatically true. Whoever can scare people enough, produce biosurvival anxiety, can sell them quickly on any verbal map that seems to give them relief. For instance, cure the anxiety by frightening people with hell and then offering them salvation. The most ignorant or crooked individuals can sell a whole system of thought that cannot bear 2 minutes of rational analysis. And any domesticated primate alpha male, however cruel or crooked, can rally the primate tribe behind them by howling that a rival alpha male is about to lead his gang in an attack on this habitat. These two mammalian reflexes are known respectively as religion and patriotism. They work for domesticated primates as for the wild primates because they are evolutionary relative successes so far. The emotional territorial or patriotic circuit also contains the pack status programs or packing order. Working in tandem with first circuit biosurvival anxieties, it is always able to pervert the functioning of the semantic rational circuit. Whatever threatens loss of status and whatever invades one's space, including one's ideological headspace, is a threat to the average domesticated primate. Thus, if a poor man has one status prop in his life, I'm a white man, not a goddamn nigger, or I'm normal, not a goddamn faggot, or whatever, any attempt to preach tolerance, common humanity, relativism, etc. is not processed through the semantic circuit, but through the emotional circuit, and is rejected as an attack on status, ego, social role. The attentive reader will remember that the grid of the first two circuits puts the pre-verbal child in a two-dimensional world, which in the simplest of our diagrams looked like this. Of course, preaching itself is bad second circuit politics, since it puts you one up on the person preached at. You are not one up unless imprinted as such by being an alpha male in the same gene pool, or conditioned as such by being a boss or other authority figure. The counterculture of the 1960s, like many other idealistic movements, failed because it did so much preaching from a morally one-up position when nobody had been imprinted or conditioned to accept it as one-up. Dominate, submit, retreat, advance. The third semantic circuit seems intimately connected with three-dimensionality, although our binocular vision, of course, also plays a role here. Specifically, right-handedness is a human or at least a primate trait. Other mammals show no right-hand preference. They are ambidextrous. Recent neurology has shown that our right-handedness is intimately connected with our tendency to use the left hemisphere of the brain more than the right. The left-handed minority are discussed below. Indeed, we use the right hemisphere so little in ordinary life that for a long time it was called the silent hemisphere. Thus, there is a genetic hardwired preference in most humans for right-handed manipulations and left brain mentations. Now, these connections seem intimately involved with our verbal semantic circuitry because the left brain is a talking brain. It is linear, analytical, computer-like, and very verbal. Thus, there is a neurological basis for the linkage between mapping and manipulating. The right hand manipulates the universe and makes artifacts, and the left brain maps the results into a model, which allows for predictions about the future behavior of that part of the universe. These are the distinctly human, post-primate characteristics. The left-handed, on the contrary, specialize in right brain functions which are holistic, supraverbal, intuitive, musical, and mystical. Leonardo, Beethoven, and Nietzsche, for instance, were all left-handed. Traditionally, left-handed people have been the subject of both dread and awe, regarded as weird, shamanic, and probably in special communication with God or the devil. There is thus a crossover, which makes for a left-right polarity in both brain functioning and hand functioning, each being a reverse mirror image of the other. Left brain, analysis, circuit-free, right hand. Right brain, intuition, circuit 6, left hand. This double and reversed right-left polarity places us neurologically in three-dimensional space. Rearranging our diagram and adding the third circuit, we can illustrate the mind field as follows. Dominate, submit, hostile strength, hostile weakness, friendly strength, friendly weakness, retreat, advance, retreat, left hand, advance, right hand. To visualize this two-dimensional sketch of a three-dimensional system, it is necessary to imagine that the advance-retreat axis is at right angles to the others. That is, see it coming out of the page at you. Aleister Crowley knew about this pragmatically before modern neurology. He taught his pupils to learn to write equally well with both hands, thereby forcing the dormant right brain to spring to activity. This is Euclidean space. It is obvious in this context why Euclidean space was the first kind of space discovered by mathematicians and by artists, and why it still seems natural to us, why some have great difficulty in imagining the non-Euclidean kinds of space used in modern physics. Euclidean space is a projection outward of the way our nervous systems stacks information on the biosurvival, emotional, and semantic circuits. Thus, the imprint sites of this circuit are located in the left cortex and closely linked with the delicate muscles of larynx and the fine manipulations of right-handed dexterity. The cortex itself is so recent in evolution that it is often called the new brain. It is found only in the higher mammals and is most developed in humans and cetaceans, dolphins and whales. Those extreme cases who take their heaviest imprint on the third circuit tend to grow up cerebrotonic. They are tall and skinny because energy is perpetually drawn upward from the body into the head. The caricatured evil genius, Dr. Sylvanus in Superman, who was virtually all head, represents the extreme toward which this type seems to be evolving. Popular speech calls them eggheads. Almost always, these cerebrotonic third circuit types ignore or are hostile to the first and second circuit functions. Playfulness puzzles them, appears silly or eccentric, and emotions both baffle and frighten them. Since we all contain this circuit, we all need to exercise it regularly. Make up a schematic diagram of your business or home and try to streamline it for more efficiency. Design a chart that explains the whole universe. Every few years, study a science you know nothing about at an adult education center. And don't neglect to play with the circuit. Write poems, jingles, fables, proverbs, or jokes. Remember, Mr. Crowley said, "You too are a star." P.S. He also said, do not lust after results. Serotonin, extreme, circuit 1 imprint, Jung's feeling type, natural child. Musculotonic, extreme, circuit 2 imprint, Jung's sensational type, adapted child. Cerebrotonic, extreme, circuit 3 imprint, Jung's rational type, adult or computer. The neurological imprint is the blueprint for the entire organism. As with the earlier circuits, the semantic circuit builds all of its conditioning and learning onto a bedrock of hardwired imprinting. Thus, many existentially thinkable thoughts are socially unthinkable since A. everybody in a given society has roughly the same semantic imprint, and B. this is reinforced daily by assumptions that are mechanically taken for granted. Thus, a genius is one who, by some internal process, breaks through to Circuit 7, a minor neurological miracle loosely called intuition, and comes back down to the third circuit with the capacity to paint a new semantic map, build a new model of experience. Needless to say, this is always a profound shock to those still trapped in the old robot imprints and is generally considered a threat to territory, ideological headspace. The long list of martyrs to free and query from Socrates onward shows how mechanical this neophobia, fear of new semantic signals, is. As Thomas Kuhn showed in The Structure of Scientific Revolution, Science Itself, the apotheosis of Third Circuit semantic rationality is not free of this neophobia. Kuhn demonstrated at length that each scientific revolution took one full generation to turn over the old worldview, and Kuhn further showed that the older scientists never are converted to the new semantic paradigm. They are, in our terminology, mechanically hooked to their original imprints. The revolution is complete, as Kuhn shows, only when a second generation not hooked to the old imprint is able to compare the two models and decides rationally that the newer one really does make more sense. But if science, the most self-correcting of all information processing third circuit functions, has this one generation time lag, what can be said of politics, religion, economics? Time lags of centuries or even millenniums are common there. This only refers to other people's politics, religions, and economics. Needless to say, the reader's own opinions on these subjects are the only reasonable and objective ones, of course. We commented earlier that in biosurvival neurology, there is no time. I just found myself doing it, we say after passing through an automatic reflex on the biosurvival circuit. Emotional territorial circuit actions begin to include time as a factor. Dominant signals may not work. The seemingly weaker mammal may offer a counter-challenge. Two dogs will walk around each other for several minutes, growling and sniffing. The chemical secretions of each reveals its actual degree of fear to the other before top dog and bottom dog becomes clear. On the human level, we often agonize over emotional decisions, becoming acutely conscious of time as we hesitate. As every suspense writer knows, the principal way to increase emotional tension is to set a time limit on a difficult or dangerous decision. See any Star Trek script, the time limit is never missing, or see any of Irving Wallace's bestsellers. Suspense is always increased, of course, if the time limit is abruptly shortened just before the climax. On the third circuit, time becomes conceptualized as well as experienced. We know ourselves as creatures of time, the tale of the tribe, the totem pole, the Odyssey of Homer, the Old Testament, the Vedas, etc. tell us what came before and often contains prophecies of what will come later. Science expands the third circuit into contemplation of time spans that stagger our imaginations. The very use of written languages and other symbols, like mathematics, creates the time-binding sense of Korzybski. We know ourselves as receivers of messages sent by sages of old, and as potential transmitters of messages that may be scanned ages in the future. The fourth circuit causes us to be even more emboldened and pressured by time. In closing this chapter, let us be reminded that Bruno was burned at the stake February the 18th, 1600 for teaching that the earth moves. Was he guilty?